If you want to learn how to mix a song completely from scratch, then this video is going to be for you. In part 1 of this series, I covered session setup, phase, levels, and basic panning. So if you missed that, be sure to go check that out. I'll have it linked somewhere up here and then also in the description. In part 2, I'm going to handle all of the drums and percussion. So we're going to dive into EQ and bus processing and compression and reverb. And part 3 is going to handle all of the instrumental and vocal processing. And then part 4 is going to be automation and finishing touches. If you want to follow along with this series, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so YouTube will let you know when the next video comes out. I'm going to be mixing the song entirely in Logic Pro, but I will be using third-party plugins. So just in case you don't have a certain plugin, I'll be sure to offer suggestions and alternatives that you can use, and even some stock Logic plugins that would work instead of third-party ones. All right, so in the first video, if you've missed it, the only plugin I used was In Phase to line up some of my drums and percussion. And then I just did some rough levels and panning. I've seen drums tackled in a few different ways. Some people pull up all the faders and kind of EQ and compress while listening to the whole drum sound. And while that's really good to give you a full picture of the drums, I like to start off going one channel at a time and just removing the mud. And sometimes it's hard to hear the mud in the context of the whole mix or the whole drum sound. So I'm just going to start with kick out, and I'm going to use my absolute favorite plugin for this is the SSL channel, because this handles, you have filters up here, you have a 4-band EQ, you have compression and gate all in one thing. Basically, if you wanted to do this in Logic, you'd need to use the channel EQ to handle your filters and EQ. You'd need to use the compressor plugin and then also the noise gate plugin. But I like this because it's all in one thing and it's kind of that classic SSL sound. First thing, I pull this up, get rid of any unwanted low end. This is just going to help kind of clean up the drum sound and get rid of that low rumble. Next, I'm going to compress it a little bit. So ratio 3:1. The attack is on the slow setting. The release is fast. And then I'm going to pull the threshold down until I'm getting this 3 decibels lighting up. And I might pull, since this is kick out, I'm going to pull this high cut down a little bit and just get rid of some of that cymbal noise, hopefully. It's a little bit, that'll help. Next, I'm going to go ahead and find some mud. There's always mud in the low mids and the drums, somewhere between 300 and 1K, and you got to go find it and get it out of there. So I like to boost, find the frequency, and then pull it out. I'll start there. Pull maybe 3 decibels out. One thing I like to note when I'm EQing drums especially, if you want a more modern or more punchy or more aggressive sound, you need to pull more of the mids out. If you want kind of a more natural sound, more old school sound, vintage sound, whatever you want to be a lot more gentle and don't do any harsh moves. So my cue's a little wider here. I'm not cutting as much, and that's going to give us kind of a rounder, fuller sound, which generally I like to go for if I have the say-so on that. That's kind of muddy in there. The idea is I'm just removing stuff and making it sound better before I even start pushing new levels or anything. Next, I'm going to go ahead and gate. Basically, the gate is going to help clean up the space in between the drum hits. If we do it right, it's going to clean up the response of the drum and help tighten up the whole performance. So I'm going to pull this range down. This is how much is going to be gated out. So that feels pretty good right there. There's this weird, I think the kick pedal is coming back and landing on the kick drum when he's not playing. So I'm trying to gate that out, but it's a little challenging. So my strategy when I have two kick mics is the kick out is going to be kind of filtered down. It's going to be that low end. It's going to be more big and kind of a longer tail. And then the kick in is going to be that sharp transient cut that gets out of the way quickly. And doing it like this is going to help manage all that cymbal bleed in the mics, because the mic that's open for a long period of time doesn't have all that high end information. And then the mic that does have that high end information is only open for a little bit. Moving on, kick in. The nice thing is a lot of this is already set, so that's why I copied it over. I'm going to look for muddy lows. That's not great either. So this release is going to be a lot faster. So I'm going to check those two together. Make sure he's hitting about the same bypassed. Got a little louder. Okay. So that's basically the process, and I'm going to do that to the rest of the close mics and then start looking at the overhead and rooms. Gotta find some fundamental here. That's good right there. I'll give it a little bit of that. Just a bit of that. I also really like 3K on snare if there's not too much bleed. So I had boosted these because they sounded good, but then you start to hear when that gate opens, you get the cymbal bleed. So I took those boosts away. We're going to have to get that high end either from the snare bottom or from a sample. And we'll make sure it's only opening when the snare hits. Next is snare bottom. So this is going to be more of like that splashy sound. So this one I'm not going to gate all the way because I like some of that kind of detail from the kick. So I'm still going to gate it, but I might only go down like maybe like 8. And then I have a lot longer of an attack on this one. Try to find some of that ringing and pull it out. There's a good amount there. That helped. I'll double check that this didn't get crazy louder. It did, so I'll pull it down. This is important because since we've set up our static mix, I don't want to add or subtract sound with my processing. I want it to kind of be where it was. So I can turn off all these now and you can hear the difference. So it's just the first pass of kind of cleaning it up. We still have that ride cymbal in there, but once we start to add in other stuff, it might not be as bad. So let's do some toms real quick. Same thing, SSL channel. I'm gonna pull this up till it gets thin and then back it down. Gonna get some mud out of there. Compress it. Gate it. Fast attack sounds better on this one for the gate because it just helps it cut through better. I'll start there and make sure it didn't get louder. Got a little louder. Do the same thing on the floor tom. All that's junk on the floor tom. I like to listen to both because it helps to balance it. Lots of cymbal bleed, but now I'm going to play it with all of the drums, like all the rooms and overheads. And even though some of the gating I did on the individual close mics might sound extreme, once you add in the rest of the room tone and everything, it balances out really nicely. So for overheads, I start with the same thing, SSL channel. We're going to clean up some low end. I'm not going to gate anything because we want the full sound here. And I'll do a faster attack. And we just want to balance it out, really smooth things over. Some of this is super harsh, so I'm going to pull that down. And then maybe add some detail back lower. Look for some mud here. That's coming along really nicely. Next is the room. So now we're starting to kind of bring percussion into the mix a little more. Sometimes for rooms, I just grab the Logic channel EQ. You don't want to wipe it out, but just get rid of some lows and some highs. And then I'll compress it with something fun, like an 1176. Let's try the bluey. So we're gonna do a faster attack and a faster release. And my goal is to kind of tame the drum transients and let that room kind of breathe. That's a little much. This is hitting around -24, so we'll push it back up. Here's without it. So really we're like trying to warm it up, get rid of those annoying cymbals, and smooth it over with compression. It's that ride cymbal. That's annoying right there. Let's hear that with it. Same strategy for the stereo room. Oh, that's really annoying. That's a much more pleasant sound there. And we're going to do the same 1176 thing. Yeah. If you don't have an 1176 plugin, you actually do with the stock Logic one. So there's two modes in here. The Studio FET is the same as the 1176 black model. Look at that, identical. And then the vintage VCA is similar to the blue model. It's about as close as you can get with stock Logic, and it's really good. I just am more used to the Waves one, honestly, so that's what I use. It's whatever you can use to quickly get results you like, honestly. It doesn't matter what you use. This definitely got louder, so I gotta pull it down. Very nice. Let me add some percussion in. This is basically another room mic, but I'm just gonna treat it with the rest of the drums. I'm gonna use the same channel strip. Harsh cymbal right there. Let's find some detail somewhere down here. That's pretty nice. Some shaker, that's just gonna fit over top of everything. This has a little too much low end on it. Clean it up a little bit. Kind of ringy. Pull that down a little bit. What I'm going to do now is start to group some of these things into buses and subgroups and that kind of thing to help me manage different elements separately. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So each little group of instruments here, I'm going to send to a bus. So my kicks go to a bus, My snares go to a bus. My toms go to a bus. My overhead would go to a bus. I'll just send it there for sake of keeping everything orderly. Percussion will go to, or sorry, rooms will go to a bus, and then percussion will go to a bus. And then all of these buses here, I need to label. So it was kick all, snare all, tom all, overhead all, room all, and perk all. And so all of these are going to go out to another bus right here, and this is going to be called drum dry. If you've watched any of my other drum processing videos, especially, you've seen me do this crazy routing before. It's just how I like to kind of keep things separate. All of these here, I'm going to highlight them and hit Control T to make tracks. So now we can go back to this view, and I put the bus right after the things. So I've got like my kicks, and they're going into kick all. What this does is kind of give us some group control over individual elements. So I'm going to compress these here, especially my close mic bundles. So I'm going to go grab, I like to do waves, RComp for this. And I usually like to do something gentle like 3-to-1 and attack 16, release 60. That's fine. We're just going for a tiny bit of gentle compression over top of everything. This is going to help balance out kind of the balance of the two elements, the two kick mics. And then also when certain kicks get too loud, it's going to help with that too. So it's going to make our quiet stuff a little louder, our loud kicks a little quieter, just overall balance out the feel. And I'll bypass it and make sure I'm still hitting pretty good. So I'm going to copy this same compressor over to snare. Great. We just want a little bit. If you don't have RComp, I'd use the Logic compressor. Studio VCA is a good one. And I actually have my default really similar to how I have that other compressor set up. It doesn't really matter as long as you're not hurting those transients, because on the drums, it's all about trying to get that punch and attack coming through. Toms, you could be a little more aggressive with the volume because they have a lot they need to cut through. Great. Push a little more floor tom. It's just gentle balance over everything. And I use the same processing throughout the close mics to help give it a uniform feel. Because if you start using a ton of different stuff, I mean, maybe that'll work for you, but I like to pretend like it's all going through the same console, the same setup. Just basically going to catch peaks on the overheads. We can speed up the attack a little bit too. Those cymbals that get a little too loud, all of that kind of stuff is what it's going to help with. Same thing with the rooms. The important thing with doing lots of layers of compression is to not do too much, because it'll very quickly add up and get out of control. But I prefer compressing at multiple stages because it's less detectable and gives you a smoother overall feel. So same thing on percussion. I'm going to just copy that over. So now all these groups here, all the groups that say all basically, we want to make sure that they are hitting drum dry kind of around -12. So they're a little loud now. I'm going to start to pull stuff down. So maybe like my overheads and rooms can come down a bit. Percussion can come down a little bit too. can come down. So now we're hitting closer to -12. And this is important just because as we go, again, like we're managing those levels, not letting it get too loud. So generally with drums, I try to go as far as I can without adding samples, and I get it as good as I can. And then if it still needs something, still has an issue, then I'll add samples in. So right now I'm trying not to, but I might end up doing like at least a snare sample to help give it some more punch, because it really, I don't know if it was the snare that was used or how I mic'd it or something, but it's really not doing it for me. Granted, I like those like thick, chunky snares. So, okay, so all of these, probably just the close mics for starters, I'm going to send to a new bus 8, and I'll send it at Unity. Unity just means 0, in case you did not know. I'm going to go over here to this new bus. This is going to be drum para for parallel, and then I'm going to Control T that. And now we got to go find a good drum parallel compression. If you're not familiar with drum parallel compression, I've done a bunch of videos on it, but it's basically you're sending a duplicate chain of your drums to a channel that's just compressing them like crazy. And that gives you a lot of punch and attack. And then when you blend that back in, you have a nice kind of just aggression and power on a fader basically that you can blend in. So now I'm going to find a compressor. Let's start with the 1176 and see if we like that. So you want a slower attack with this and a really fast release. And you can compress it just a crazy amount. So that's a ridiculous amount. We're going to pull it back down to -12. I'm going to keep that, but then try out some other compressors. H-comp is a good one. Put the ratio at like 4:1. Let's try 8:1. Let's just go crazy. This one's cool because you have a punch you can add in. Kind of a little transient enhancement built into the compressor. So I'm going to roll with that. You can experiment with the stock Logic ones if you don't have any of these. You're really just looking for something that adds a lot of punch without messing up your low end or like adding too much cymbal or something like that. So what we're going to do now is blend this in with our original drum dry. That's pretty good right there. These two, I'm going to send to yet another bus. So I'm going to grab bus 10, and this is going to be the drum master. This is like where all the drums end up before they go to the main out. And then I'll send this guy back to that mix bus, create a track for him. This is a little hot, the drum master. So I'm going to go ahead and pull down the drum dry and the drum parallel till the drum master is at -12. All right, we're going to do a room. So I'm going to basically take everything, all of these, and percussion, and send these to my bus 9 at Unity. And what we're going to do with this one is do a reverb. And we're basically going to try to make our own artificial room sound that sounds really good, and then just blend that in with our drums. Just kind of makes them bigger and sound fancier and all the things. My starting point for this is always TrueVerb drum room. It's just in the settings here. And make sure you turn off direct. You don't want direct because direct is what's going into the reverb, but we don't want that because it's on a bus. So let's see where we're at right now. That's pretty good. It's a little kick heavy, so I'm going to pull the kick down. And then I'm going to pull this all the way down and blend it in. like liven it up a little bit. And on this, I'm going to add just a low cut to clean that up a little bit. Finally, on my drum master, I'm going to add the classic SSL compressor. This is just the stereo compressor. For drums, I always do 30 milliseconds with a 0.1 second release, a ratio of 4:1, and then I'll just pull this threshold down until I'm getting 1 to 3 decibels of gain reduction. For now, I'm going to roll with not having a sample. I'm actually really enjoying this sound. Once I kind of go through and get my core drum sound done, that's what I call this, is my core drum sound. I then go back and add any sort of color and enhancement and like icing on the cake. Because up until this point, we've just been focusing on cleaning and adding punch. And so now all our bases are covered and we can get a little more creative and try to spice things up and make it sound better. So the first thing I like to do with this is FabFilter Saturn. So on all of the drum subgroups here, I'm going to add FabFilter Saturn. It looks like this. This is a Eric Valentine trick. If you haven't seen any of his mixes, he's incredible. He's got some stuff here on YouTube, so I'll link it if I remember. But this is basically a multi-band saturator. And what this allows you to do is add crossovers. And a crossover is kind of like you're dividing the EQ spectrum. You have different spots that you can add more or less saturation to. So what I like to do is stick to the upper bands for this. So I have a crossover at 630 and a crossover at 52K or 5K basically. And I'm not going to touch the low end, but I'm going to add to the other two bands. And this helps to add punch and color and just makes it feel all around better. So I'll start to push this up in the mids. All right, let's check some top end. That's a nice little bit of saturation there. Nice, onto the snare. This is why I didn't go crazy boosting the top end earlier, because like doing this adds top end in there. And you'll notice I have my output at -1 on all these. It just helps to balance it back out, because it does get a little louder when you do it, but it's not bad. All right, let's try some toms. If you add too much, you start to get that cymbal bleed back, so it's always a balancing act. That's good mid-range right there. It's a little too much. All right, rooms. Nice. Not too much there. Percussion. Let's listen to something else. Something we can add to our kick and snare specifically, but also our toms it'll help with. They're two really situational plugins, and I unfortunately don't have a good substitute for Logic for these. But the first one is the RBass plugin from Waves, and this helps to fatten up your low end. So I'm going to do it on kick out because that's our fundamental low end there. So this adds like all that super low juice, and you can experiment with where it's hitting. And then you pull this intensity down until you're getting the amount you want from it. That's obviously way too much. That's pretty good. That fattens it up nicely. So then I'm going to toggle it on and off to make sure it's not making it louder. Cool. That's actually pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit more. Pull this down just a bit. I'm going to do the same thing on snare. Trying to find where it really smacks the best. So this added a lot. You need to balance it back out. Cool, so that adds some thickness and kind of low end to it. You can do the same things to the toms if you want. And you want to look for when the drum hits, not when it decays. So like toms, the pitch goes down, they go doo. So you want to find right at that hit. You don't want to do it too late or too low because it's going to be kind of a delayed response. That feels good right there. Pull that down a good amount. So that's going to thicken that up. We'll do the same thing on the floor tom. That's good right there. So I'll check it without it. Here's with it. Thickens it up just a little bit. You might have heard our floor tom just open. So definitely when we're automating later, we're going to have to change the threshold a little bit depending on where the drum's at. But I do that later. The only other things I would do to drums here is maybe address percussion if it wasn't cutting enough, but honestly, it's cutting quite a bit. I'll show you what I would do to add a sample and try to decide if I want to do it or not. So I'm going to duplicate this snare top right here, and I'm going to call it snare trig. And then I'm going to take this entire snare top track and copy it down. So you should be left with the same exact thing. I'm going to actually leave all this processing because I've already kind of gated out the mic. So it's going to make it easier to trigger it. And so I'm going to go ahead and grab trigger, slate trigger, and I'm going to do this one in mono. And I've seen people use trigger and they put the rooms and everything in, but I like to separate it out. So in this snare trigger, I'm just going to try to find a snare that kind of sounds good, kind of sounds similar. What you don't want to do with trigger, and this is where I see people like kind of mess up their drum sound, is you want it to sound like the trigger you pick, you want it to sound like the snare. You want it to be really similar, but add like some character or something that the original snare is lacking. Don't just go like reinvent the snare sound unless it's terrible. But generally, like it's not that bad. So I'm going to pull this down until I get some triggering. There we go. Now we're triggering. I'm just going to go look. I'm going to turn on audition. I don't like that. Okay. Let's see what else we have. That one's pretty close. That one's also good. Let me hear the original. That's already really close. Too low. Too ringy. Nope. Nope. That one's really good. Actually, I might use that. So I'll grab Z1 and Z3. And then what I try to do is tune it to the original snare. That's actually pretty good. We really don't want to hear it. You just want to add some sauce. And sometimes I look for a couple different snares and kind of make my own snare sound. close already. No, I like that right there. That's what I'm sticking with. I know it's going to feel ridiculous, but I'm going to put another SSL channel at the end of this and try to just blend that drum back into the snare sound. So just a little bit of compression for punch. So tame the bottom a little bit. That we're going to pull out of there. And then I'm going to find the ringing and tame that a little bit. It's going to help it sit better with the other snares. Pull the volume down because it's a little loud. And now our snare all is probably a little hot. So it's time to rebalance the overall feel of these. Kind of pull everything down a bit. There's without it, there's with it. I'm going to do a kick as well. So I'm going to grab the kick in, do the same process. Same thing, we'll call it kick trigger. I'm going to add slate trigger on the end. And grab this kick in, bring it down. And I'm going to up the volume a little bit. So we want to be triggering most of the time. And I'm going to go find a kick that sounds good. No way. That one's pretty close. We want something that's kind of not super modern because this kick isn't like anything in your face. That one's really good, actually. It might feel weird to like tune your samples, but if you can get it tuned really well with your other drums, it's going to clean up your low end and help it sound like a real thing. I hate the idea of using triggers, but sometimes you have to just enhance it and get it sounding kind of modern. So that's what I do there is I tune it. And then I check the phase too, just to make sure everything's where it should be. So we missed a hit there. So I'm going to pull this detail down just a little more, push the volume just a little more. There we go. And then same thing, I'm going to do the SSL channel on it. Clean up the low end, pull this down, compress it a little more, and take out some of this. That's just so much. That's mud. There we go. That feels really good. That'll help get rid of this weird kind of noisy kick sound because we're blending in the trigger that does not do that. Make sure this is still hitting where it should be. I'm going to actually move my RBass to this kick now. That's ridiculous now. It actually doesn't even need it. It's super low endy. Awesome. That wraps up part 2, which is all the drums and percussion sounds. I want to thank you for sticking around so far. Let me know down in the comments which part of this was your favorite or that you learned the most from. I always love getting that kind of feedback. Be sure to stay tuned for part 3. If you're watching this near the time of release, part 3 will be out 1 week after part 2. Otherwise, it should be out already. I'll have it linked up top or down in the description for you to go check out. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe.